Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thanks very much for joining us. Before we begin properly, can I just draw your attention to the protocol slide on your screen just now, and just point a couple of things out in particular to you. Can you please make sure that your microphone is on mute for the duration of this session, and can you switch off your camera as well? This session has been recorded, and if your camera is on, there's a good chance you'll be captured on film. I won't go over the rest of the protocols, that they kind of speak for themselves. So as I said, welcome to this session today. My name is Brendan Duffy, an attainment advisor with Education Scotland, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Liz Somerville, attainment advisor, and Patricia Leeson, also attainment advisor. Today's session is entitled Pedagogy for Equity, and we're going to go over these main points on this slide. The focus is very much on equity and how high quality teaching can close the poverty-related attainment gap. And we're going to consider the existing evidence on what we know works in terms of closing the gap. And in terms of those 6 areas in bold there, we're going to present a snapshot of those areas, and there will be a follow-up to today's session in the coming weeks and months where we'll go into those areas in more detail. So today is very much a snapshot and overview of those main themes and areas. So what does work in terms of closing the poverty-related attainment gap? Well, the research, which is referenced on this slide, identifies a number of factors that are proving successful in closing the gap. These include strong leadership, high quality learning and teaching, an inclusive curriculum, the effective use of data, one-to-one support, and the deployment of the best teachers to teach intervention groups, or redeploying support teachers who have a good track record in raising achievement. Today, though, we are going to focus on high quality teaching and learning, with a particular focus on the pedagogies which we know will help to close the poverty-related attainment gap. The graph on this slide provides clear evidence of the impact of high quality teaching on our most disadvantaged learners. It also provides evidence of the negative impact on those learners of poor quality teaching. And I'll just pause for a few seconds just to give you all a chance to read the information which is on that slide. The Teaching and Learning Toolkit from the Education Endowment Foundation has been very recently updated. In fact, it was just updated at the end of last week. And this is one of the best sources in terms of research-based evidence on what works in terms of high quality teaching and in turn closing the poverty-related attainment gap. I'm now going to provide a snapshot of some of these areas. So first of all, let's consider metacognition. Metacognition and self-regulation. It's a high-impact, low-cost approach to improving the attainment of disadvantaged learners. But what do we mean by metacognition and self-regulation? Self-regulation is about the extent to which learners are aware of their strengths and weaknesses and the strategies they use to learn. It describes how they can motivate themselves to engage in learning and develop strategies to enhance their learning and to improve. It will look different for learners of different ages and for different tasks, but teachers will recognise these characteristics in their most effective learners. Self-regulated learning can be broken into 3 essential components that teachers need to know about to help their pupils to develop into successful learners. First of all, cognition. This is the mental process involved in knowing, understanding, and learning. By cognitive strategies, we mean skills like memorization techniques or subject-specific strategies. This is the bread and butter of good teaching. Cognitive strategies are fundamental to acquiring knowledge and completing learning tasks. Secondly, metacognition. This is about the way learners monitor and purposefully direct their learning. By metacognitive strategies, we mean the strategies we use to monitor or control our cognition, such as checking that our memorization technique was accurate or selecting the most appropriate cognitive strategy for the task we are undertaking. And thirdly, motivation is about our willingness to engage our metacognitive and cognitive skills and apply them to learning. Motivational strategies will include convincing oneself to undertake a tricky revision task now, affecting our current well-being as a way of improving our future well-being in the test which is still to come. Cognition, metacognition, and motivation all interact in complex ways during the learning process. In order to implement metacognition and self-regulation into your practice, the EEF Toolkit recommends these steps. First of all, develop your own understanding of metacognition and self-regulation in order to support the learners in your classroom. Secondly, metacognitive strategies can improve pupil learning, activate prior knowledge, and move to independent practice. You should apply metacognition to different subjects rather than introduce it generically. Thirdly, model the approach by verbalizing your own metacognitive thinking and scaffold tasks. Fourthly, set appropriate challenge, i.e. differentiate. Avoid overloading pupils' cognitive processes when developing new strategies. Fifthly, guide and support purposeful dialogue to build understanding of cognitive and metacognitive strategies. And finally, develop independent learning skills in your children. The next area to consider is reading comprehension. The average impact of reading comprehension strategies is an additional 6 months progress over the course of a year. Teaching these strategies is particularly important for disadvantaged learners who may not have access to books at home and are therefore less likely to develop these skills intuitively. Reading comprehension strategies focus on the learner's understanding of written text. Pupils learn a range of techniques which enable them to comprehend the meaning of what they read. These strategies include inferring meaning from context, summarizing or identifying key points, using graphic organizers or visualizers, developing questioning strategies, and monitoring their own comprehension, and then identifying and resolving difficulties for themselves. And there are clear links here, obviously, to what I've just talked about in terms of metacognition. In terms of steps to implementing reading comprehension strategies, a few points to consider. Teach and model the strategies. A wide range of strategies and approaches can be successful, but for many pupils, they need to be taught and explicitly and consistently taught. Evidence suggests that reading comprehension approaches need to be tailored to pupils' current reading capabilities. So again, differentiation is key. It is important to identify the appropriate level of text difficulty in order to provide appropriate context to practice the skills, desire to engage with the text, and enough challenge to improve reading comprehension. And also important to support pupils to apply the comprehension strategies independently to other reading tasks, contexts, and subjects.
Following on from what Brendan said about reading, we know that our children from our most disadvantaged backgrounds don't do as well in reading and in other areas of the curriculum. And reading is a pathway to those other areas of the curriculum. And I hope you'll indulge me for just a moment as I explain one of the resources that can be really beneficial to use in addressing that gap. It's beneficial, and I want to talk about it today because it has elements of really excellent pedagogy. It's where we use assessment very specifically, very proportionately, and in a very targeted way to ensure that we recognise the difficulties that our children are having and take action to address those difficulties for those particular children. It's an early intervention strategy. So the Primary 1 Literacy and Assessment and Action resource is specifically aimed at Primary 1 and for the use of Primary 1 teachers. However, the first part of this assessment resource is observing the literacy environment. And that's because we know that we can't really assess children properly unless we know that we're giving them the right experiences. So that first assessment that is included within the POLAAR resource is really an audit to be used at a whole school level. And it looks across a whole range of aspects of literacy, which were identified by Professor Keith Topping as those aspects of literacy which can predict future reading ability. So as a whole school, if you look across those, you will see the areas where there are real strengths in the school. That's really embedded practice, but in some areas that are maybe not as embedded, it also gives you actions that you can take to further embed those sorts of strategies within classrooms across the primary school. The next part of the resource is where we get down to really targeting and looking at individual children, and often children with those literacy difficulties are children who are more vulnerable children, or children who are from disadvantaged communities. The first assessment that we do there, observing the child and taking action, is basically the class teacher sitting down at this time of the year, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today, just at this time of year, round about September, October, with the primary 1 children, where they're already beginning to notice that some of those children aren't picking up the things that they should be picking up in terms of knowing their letters, recognising words, using phonemes, that they're not able to do that. They're already falling behind. So when you've got that group of children, this is not a resource that you would be using with your whole class. Absolutely not. You would think about that small group of children in your class, and as the class teacher, you would rate them against 20 of these indicators that were recognised by Professor Keith Topping. Once you've rated them, you can get to sort of the root. What is it's causing them the real difficulty? What are the areas I really need to work on with this child? And there are a whole lot of actions there to address each one of these areas, and a whole lot of resources as well. And they can be used by the class teacher, by support staff in the class, and maybe even, you know, involving parents and families in that. If we do those actions for a number of weeks, the child will improve in those areas. Only a very small amount of children won't show improvement over the course of those actions. And for those children, we would suggest doing the 3-minute teacher assessment. That looks at a very, very discrete number of those aspects, the 3 that Professor Topping thinks are the most important aspects: letter sounding, word recognition, and phonemic blending. And it's each of those little assessments takes 3 minutes per child, and it gives a much more detailed picture of that child's difficulties. There are actions to follow that, and for some of those children there might be an actual recognised, you know, learning need that you would need to seek further advice, perhaps from educational psychologists, do a bit of further reading, but all of that assessment is already in place, and we're halfway there. So the POLAAR assessment and literacy, assessment and action resource can be found on the National Improvement Hub. As I say, all of the things that you need are there, all of the activities, all of the resources. As well as literacy, numeracy and mathematics, we know that our most disadvantaged children, there is a definite attainment gap there as well. And I'm not going to go into anything in detail here. However, there are some aspects of our teaching of numeracy and mathematics which is just excellent pedagogy, and it can be applied to other areas of the curriculum as well. For example, we know that concrete, pictorial, abstract is an evidence-based approach that really can aid children's understanding of mathematical concepts, and that's not age. There isn't an age and stage where that should stop. You know, if you're doing higher maths and it aids your understanding to be using concrete materials, then we should be encouraging their use. The positive mindset is really, really important, particularly for our most vulnerable children. It's okay, we need to create a place where it's okay for them to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are a good thing. We learn from our mistakes. We also need to create within our classrooms a place where we talk very positively about maths. That, you know, I'm rubbish at maths, or so am I rubbish at maths. We can't say that anymore, and I'm very guilty of it myself. We need to stop it. In maths as well, one of the, linking back to what Brendan was saying about metacognition, the process of the calculations is what's important. It's not the answer that's the important part of it. It's the process. It's about how we get there, and that relates to that maths talk, encouraging children to talk about their learning, talk about how did you work that out? Making connections for children, making connections very explicit. So if we're teaching multiplication, we connect that to our learning in division, for example. Creating spaces where children can learn both independently and collaboratively, so that they're learning from each other and have the opportunity to work independently as well. Obviously, as well as in other areas of the curriculum, really important in maths that we take account of prior learning, where pupils' prior learning is, where their understanding is, and build from there. Problem solving, instead of asking them to find the answer, try giving them the answer and asking them what was the question. And these strategies can be used in all areas of the curriculum. Also in mathematics, particularly explicitly teaching a range of strategies that children can use. And all of these things, if we are applying these kinds of, this kind of pedagogy, this kind of teaching across the curriculum, it will absolutely benefit our most vulnerable learners.
You're on mute, Liz.
There's always one time, isn't there? Had to be me. Okay. Want to come also to feedback, because again, it is one of those top changes that we know if we can do this well, that we'll make the difference. And currently in the new EF tool, they're saying that we can actually gain 6 months for children if this is done well. And I want to just take just a wee minute and just give you time to read this statement and just consider, is there anything in it that resonates for you? So I'll just give you a wee second to actually read it. So currently there is this big debate, and I've got to say nobody loves a bit of Shirley Clark more than me, but there is a big, massive debate out there right now about, does feedback need to be written? Should it be verbal? Should it be on the move? Should it be, and there's a whole massive industry right now about how feedback should look. And actually what the EF are saying here is, that's actually not what's important. What's important is that it's based on good principles of feedback. Whether it's written or whether it's verbal is not as important as the actual following the principles. And if you look at the next slide here, you'll see what the EF's principles are. Brendan, could you move the slide on, please? So you'll see the principles are here, and that's the first three. And this is from the EEF guidance paper, which again, you can tap into their website for. And the first part, it really talks about laying the foundations for effective feedback. You know, and that's what Trish was talking about a minute ago. That's about there is no right and there is no wrong answers. It's that safe space. It is about being able to actually ensure that there is quality instruction at the beginning as well, because if you can give as much feedback as you like, but actually if the teaching and learning hasn't been good quality, then the feedback that you're going to give it is going to be irrelevant. So what we're actually saying here is the teaching and learning, the atmosphere, the ethos in that classroom are more important than whether you're going to do on the spot or whether you're going to give verbal or written feedback. Okay. The second one talks about deliver appropriately timed feedback that focuses on moving learning forward. Okay, so again, what we're saying is there's no right or wrong way to do this. However, the most important thing is that the feedback you give will move the learning on. Okay, so the task, the pupil, the whole class all needs to be considered in this, and and it has to be planned for. So this isn't something that, you know, we're just going to do ad hoc. We're actually going to consider whenever we're planning a lesson, where will I give feedback? When is it appropriate to give feedback? Sometimes if we give it too quickly, do we not actually develop those meta skills that Brendan was talking about earlier? You know, are we giving different pupils different quantities of feedback, different levels of feedback, so that we can actually make sure that we're planning and we're thinking from the very, very beginning about the types of feedback and the impact we want our feedback to have. The third one here says plan, about how people will receive and use feedback. So we've touched on that a little, but that second part of that is just as important as the first part. How are they going to use the feedback? So, you know, say for instance, we've got a child possibly in P7 and, you know, there's a whole lot of technical errors in their writing. Actually, they're more than capable. So there's been lots and lots of work on paragraphing. There's been lots and lots of work on really encouraging that child to edit their work effectively. But actually, there's no time for them to do it. There's no time for them to up-level their work. There's no time for them to review and consider how they're going to move that learning forward. How can we make sure that we carefully think through how the children will actually mobilise the feedback that they've been given? And also, it's back to, again, metacognition stuff. How can we encourage children to actually do this independently? How do we encourage that self-regulation so that children will just automatically, this will become part of their practice? Okay, and then we get to the two measures. So this is the raging debate. You know, is it written feedback? Is it verbal feedback? And again, you can see, and I know you can't read these in detail, but I would encourage you to go on and look at the guidance report. But it is important for you to recognise that actually both are valid, depending on the type of feedback and the subject area and what you want to achieve from that feedback. So for instance, if it is written feedback and maybe there's been a piece of work, maybe you're in third year and you've been doing some work with your class on a really descriptive piece of writing or an evaluative piece of writing, whatever it is you're working on. And then we really want children to get that quality feedback that will really hone in on all the elements that they have completed well and all the things that might be something they want to consider in the future. Doing that in writing is perfectly acceptable. But equally, you know, if you're going to do the on-move and you're wanting that feedback to be rapid, you're wanting that feedback to be taken on board straight away, then the verbal on-the-move feedback is equally as valid. So again, I think that whole raging debate stuff doesn't matter which method you're using, as long as it's moving learning forward. And considering that principle number 2 about the timing of it, when is the timing appropriate? And if you're going to have to sit and take home millions and millions of jotters, let's just go back to, you know, Dylan Williams and that whole thing of mark less to achieve more, you know, coming right back to basics. Think about when is it appropriate to give the writing feedback and when is it appropriate to give verbal so you can move the learning on quickly. Okay, and that balance will be your professional judgment and you deciding how you're going to take that forward. I'm going to mention this last one, but this is probably more at a school level. And this is this idea about consistency. So if you've got, if you're in a primary 3 class and you are getting really strong feedback that's moving your learning on, and that's what's facilitating your ability to not only just move forward learning, but increase your meta skills that we heard about earlier. If you then go into the next class and that feedback is not consistent, then you as a learner are going to fall back. So it very much is as a school taking forward feedback as a whole establishment and actually getting time collegiately to sit down and talk about the types of feedback that you are going to give, how you're going to give. And my advice to you would be to throw under these 3 principles and don't get bogged down with the actual method. Okay, so there's also a big review that's happened with the EEF recently. And part of that, again, go into the EEF site and you'll find it. What the EEF have said is there's actually 4 different types of feedback that you can give. Okay, so the first type of feedback is task orientated. Okay, and this is, again, a perfectly valid use of feedback, and probably this is one of the ones where it's going to be on the go. It's going to be given quite quickly. So that would, you know, a good example of that might be, you know, the teacher notes that there's some key features missing from, you know, a science experiment that's happening around circuits, you know, and she might just go over and say, you know, I can see here that you're identifying the bulbs and the wires in this circuit. Could you make sure you label them as well? Okay, so that's going to strengthen their learning. It's going to move their learning on, but actually it's really just about task. But without the task and without completing the task correctly, then you can't actually move the learning on. And what I would also suggest in your own classrooms is thinking as well as who else can be involved in that feedback around task. If you have other people in your classroom, can they be focusing and giving you that opportunity to free you up around giving feedback in task and actually give you feedback in other areas? The next type of feedback we can have is around subject. And this idea is that feedback is really about the subject itself. Okay, the feedback can therefore be applied in other subject tasks. For instance, a maths teacher notes that many pupils are not ordering the operations correctly, which they need to do across the subject. She then selects a problem and then asks the whole class, find problems from last session when you were incorrectly ordering these operations. Okay, so she's given them feedback, but it's also a next step in their learning. It's going to move their learning on as they begin to really drill into what they need to change. And again, that's a very it's a very meta approach to this, rather than always just being about here's I need you to do this differently. I need you to learn more about this. It's really encouraging that meta approach that we've talked about earlier. The other type of feedback that again is perfectly valid is just around that self-regulation. The feedback's focused on the learner's own self-regulation. And we're looking for successful learners, we're looking for independent learners. If we're not giving these children feedback on this, then that will not improve. Okay. So that could be little prompts, that could be, for instance, if it was in maths, one child doesn't know where to start. So you're giving them, an extra wee bit of information. If it's literacy, it might be, we're sitting with a blank bit of paper. That child might need a wee bit of scaffolding around that to get them going, to get them started, so that the next time they come along, they're actually able to think, well, how did I get started? Okay, so giving feedback about that. There is also one other type of feedback, and I would hope you notice that this one's not the same colour as the other three. And this one is personal feedback. And what we're saying here is that this is about the person. So you might hear things in this, whenever we're delivering this orally, it's really easy to do, and it is about changing this in the way we work. But if we're wondering about how many times have we heard ourselves saying, "That's great work, oh, you're brilliant at that." That's very, very personal feedback. It's not moving the learning on, but it is something that we get caught up in. And actually, it would be more useful for the children in our classroom to be thinking about the tasks, the subject, the self-regulation strategies. And if we're talking specifically, in the next slide, you'll see a wee statement here saying, look, how do you manage this equitably? And I think the key for here is you already know your children. You know in your class who needs the additional support. You know who has maybe been impacted by poverty. And actually, how much extra feedback do they get? If you're managing this and you are planning for it, then are you going to make sure that that group of children is going to get feedback every single time you're undertaking writing? If you're a primary school teacher, or if you're in a maths class in high school, are you going to make a point of specifically going over and ensuring that that child is getting the feedback they need to keep them on task, to make sure that they're successful with their tasks? What are you going to do, and what does that child need? And I suppose that's really just knowing your children really well and knowing the type of feedback that they need. So if you've got a child who is not independent and doesn't have the meta strategies, which we know makes the biggest difference for our children who have been impacted by poverty, what feedback are you going to give them that's going to encourage them to move on? So that is really everything about feedback. So I'm going to move on, because we've given you quite a very, very snapshot. And what I would suggest as well is this is really an introduction to what's coming, because over the next couple of months, we are going to develop probably about 20-25 minute more in-depth training courses that would really give you kind of hands-on practical advice on how you can actually develop these and close the gap, and use these to close the gap in your classroom. But before you can get to metacognition, before you can get to feedback, before you can get to reading, maths, anything, you need to have relationships, and this underpins everything that we do. And I don't know what you think of this statement. It gets a very mixed response, this statement. But I suppose it comes from a chap called Comer, who actually says that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. Okay, so maybe the kids don't need to like you, but they definitely need to have a relationship with you. Okay, and we've heard a lot about what works. Without the relationship, it's not going to work. So let's have a wee think about relationship stuff. Okay, and I suppose we've moved on a lot over the last, 6-7 years of the attainment challenge. I remember in my own school, whenever I was a head teacher, we would have, a fair element of pity, and maybe even not pity, but maybe moving up into sympathy, where people would really understand the barriers that children faced. They care about them, but they wouldn't know what to do about them. And I suppose what we need to do is move to being more compassionate. And compassionate doesn't always mean feeling sorry for a child. What it does is it's really about that understanding. I understand what barriers you're facing, and actually I want to relieve those barriers. I want to mitigate for them. I want to reduce them. So in order for you to really do that, you actually have to really get your head around all the barriers that children face. And we're going to just, again, this is a whistle-stop tour of this stuff. So in the next slide, we're going to have a wee quiz, okay? Because here we have all the kind of common barriers, challenges that children are facing in our schools at the moment. And I'm not going to ask you to do it in the chat, like, just for your own interest, just see if you think true or false, and I'll give you the answers at the end, okay? So just looking at some of these themes here. Already at age 5, there are 6 to 13 months gap for children in problem solving ability, okay? And there's an 11 to 18th month gap in expressive vocabulary. Well, true or false? Which one do you think? Here's another one. 1 in 10 children and young people diagnosed with a mental health disorder. 1 in 10. And 1 in 10 have a low level of happiness. Okay? True or false? Care experienced children and young people are 6 to 7 times more likely to be excluded from school and have poorer leaver destinations and will attain less well. True or false? Toxic stress, trauma, these things are caused by high levels of a stress hormone, and it impacts on the development of the body and the brain. True or false? The short and the long-term impact of ACEs includes a multitude of health and social issues. True or false? I think you're getting I'll do you one more, but I think we're getting the hint here that basically they're all true. And I'm sure that a lot of you have already got a good knowledge of some of these aspects. But here's the last one for you, okay? Looked after children and additional support needs, and children with additional support needs, and those from poorer areas are more likely to be excluded, okay? And here's another nice one for you. 80% of young offenders in Polmont had been excluded at school, okay? 80%, so 80% of those kids in that school or in that jail, young offenders institution, had all been excluded at some point in time. So for us to really make the difference, it's got to be about the relationships, but we have to that empathy, that compassion. And remember, the difference between empathy and compassion is that compassion, you understand and want to do something about it. You have to take the time to really do the professional learning around this if you haven't already. So in the next slide, what we'll see is it really is all about relationships. And I'll pop these links into the chat because they are really, really useful and just giving you a quick snapshot of what is available out there. Not expecting you to go on today, but you might want to quickly cut and paste this over so you've got it for another time. Okay. But it is about, ensuring that, we are being nurturing that we are considering, you know, how are we caring for children? Do we understand the trauma that these children are facing so that then we can take steps to mitigate it for them? We might never always take it away, but we can definitely, you know, put our energies into mitigating. And you know, what I would also suggest to you as well in this one is keep it simple. This is about, if you remember what the girl said at the beginning, and you'll see in the next slide, it's an important statement, but this is about keeping it simple and having a relationship. And if you've got a child in your class and you don't have that relationship with them, then they're not going to learn and they're not going to close the gap, and their life chances are going to not be as positive as if you do. And I know how hard it is. I've been there. I've you know, those relationships are tough, especially whenever, you know, you're getting the backlash of the trauma that these children have already faced. But I did like this quote. I thought she was quite funny whenever she's saying, you know, you won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. And the reason they do show up is because they want to just have a connection. They've got that relationship with you. And if you don't like them, fake it, you know. So this overall is just a general taster of back to basics. And what we are saying is here, this is our takeaway message. If you get that quality teaching and learning in the classroom, you will make the difference for pupils in your classroom. You will push on that disadvantaged student. And also that for you is about making sure that your professional learning is up to date, and also that you are taking the time to ensure that the relationships are the foundation that you're going to deliver that high quality professional learning. So what's next? For you, I would suggest that you might want to just could be thinking about, you know, would there be anything from what you've heard today that you want to do differently? Is there anything that you want to go and look at in a wee bit more depth? I would highly recommend the EAF guidance reports, because it breaks it down step by step. And you know, there are also some lovely pieces on the EAF around how you can, they have like email series where you can sign up for an email metacognition session, and actually they'll send you an email with professional reading. It's done over, like, you know, I think it's about an 8-week period. But these things are really, really useful just for chunking up the learning for you. And, you know, longer term, where do you see yourself going with this? What's happening next week? What's happening next month? And I suppose for us in the next slide, it will show you what our next plans are. So we plan to have a series of shorts. We're talking kind of 20-25 minute learning experiences, and we're going to go into a wee bit more depth than we've been able to today, and just looking at things slightly different, and always considering, you know, we know this is good teaching and learning, but how do I give a wee bit more? How can I give a wee bit more? How can I make the inputs, how can I make the support that I give more equitable and not equal? Okay. Thank you very much for your time today. I think we're actually finishing a few minutes early. If there is any questions MD's got, I'm sure the panel will be quite happy to take a couple of questions if you feel you would want to ask any questions at this time. But I would say look out for these sessions, and you know, if you're not on Twitter, then sign yourself up to Twitter, and the ES we'll send that information out on our ES Twitter page, so you can keep your eye on for what's coming up. If there's anything here that you think I need to know more about that.
I think, as well as any questions, if you want to share anything that's particularly resonated with you from what you've heard today, it'd be interesting to see that either again in the chat pane, or, as Liz said, we're more than happy for you to unmute and just come in and let us know what you think. Mrs. Thompson's put there, it is a lot to think about. It is. Don't try to think about it all at once. Wee bit at a time. Pick the thing you're going to look at first. Okay, if there are no questions, guys, we'll let you go on with your night. Thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And like we said, whistle stop tour. Come to the good stuff later on.